Is it working?
Hey, I recorded it. Hold on.
We need to have a big sign that says Road View.
Hold on. Let me.
Oh, we think
There we go.
Hi, Roger. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Roger, we wanted to maximize our time with you. So I went over some of your accomplishments from your resume. And it's, of course, as you know, it's too long for me to have mentioned everything, but I went through some of your education and that you were trained at Top Gun. And I really want to get it to you as quick as possible. So per our exchanges via email, I think we're going to have you talk a little bit about your training at Top Gun, and then a little bit about those frequently asked questions that you mentioned so much, and then we'll open it up to questions. But before I throw it to you, Roger, I would ask you all to please help me welcome Rodger Welch.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Roger.
So we're starting. Okay, great. Hey, aloha, everyone. And thanks for this opportunity. I thought I would start with just a few minutes of intro on why you might be watching me on the screen. And we'll go back to the Top Gun 1 movie in 1986, which is when I went to Top Gun, actually. And it was, I guess I'm 100 years old now, but I was a lieutenant then, and I was instructor pilot in the Fleet Replacement Squadron, which meant the squadron that when you get your wings, you go there to learn how to fly the airplane you're going to fly. And in that case, it was VFA 125, which is an F-18 squadron. And then in 1986, the F-18 was pretty new, in fact, brand new. And I was one of the first people who had made a cruise on a carrier with the Hornet. In fact, the very first squadrons. There was VFA 113 and 25 and CAG 14, and we cruised the very first cruise in 1985 on with Hornets. And so I went to Top Gun after that. I came back after that cruise and became an instructor, and I was a landing signal officer, which meant I was one of the guys who caught the airplanes as they came in, as they landed, you know, with the microphone, and we told them where they were, high, low, left, right, things like that. So that's maybe part of the reason I'm here. But another part, which is interesting, is when I was in Top Gun, my mom was the director of family services at Miramar, where Top Gun was then. And it's not there now, it's in Fallon, Nevada. But it was a shorter course, it's maybe 6 weeks, 7 weeks long. And it was only fighter kind of stuff with a little bit of attack stuff, because it was mostly for the fighters. Top Gun was built in the late 60s and early 70s because the kill ratio in Vietnam was very low, and they needed to standardize it a little bit and figure out how to get the kill ratio higher. And once Top Gun was built at Miramar in the late 60s, the kill ratio went from 20 to 1 to like 3 to 1. So, but what's interesting is that the original Top Gun 1 movie cast, Breckenheimer and those guys, they all interviewed my mom because my dad was killed in Vietnam. He's a fighter pilot. I was 10 years old. And I mean, Tom Cruise was kind of trying to be me, I think, because I was angry. I had a chip on my shoulder, and I was in Top Gun, and they were trying to figure out how to solve this guy. And so there's many of us, that just not just me, there's many of us who in the same situation, we lost our dads, but I happened to be there then. And they interviewed my mom and myself and Top Gun, and we told them what we thought this guy might look like, this Maverick guy. And so fast forward to the Top Gun Maverick movie, which you just saw, and I hope you all enjoyed it. And I think that the way they portrayed it, that this is a captain who is not made admiral, and largely because of his attitude and because of the things he did, despite what he was ordered to do, it was very realistic. And there was a few things that were not quite right, but there was more things in the movie that were right than were wrong. And the Tailhook organization actually had some things to do with what got pulled out of the movie, which would have aggravated naval aviators and would have not passed the reality check. There were still some things in there that were not quite right. So from there, I would say that the movie itself was very realistic. The actors were very true to form. The attitude they portrayed, like between each other, was exactly the attitude that's in every ready room that I've ever been in, which is you have to be on the edge of your game. You have to be prepared to take a barb and barb back. And there was complete competition all the time in everything you did. So I guess I'll stop there for a minute and see if anybody has any questions about what I just said.
I think I want to ask first, Rodger, what was one of those things that you said they didn't get quite right?
I was wondering the same thing.
They didn't get quite right.
Yes.
Well, let me just start it with what they did get right. Okay, I'll answer the question first. You remember at the end of the movie when everybody ejected and Miles Teller came back, you know, and he shot down a helicopter and then got shot down by SAM, the surface-to-air missile. That probably wouldn't have happened. Okay, so they got that a little bit wrong. You know, you're not gonna risk a multi-million-dollar airplane and go back. You might. I mean, I would have, and some of us would have, because we didn't always follow instructions. But so maybe that was right. But then when they trekked over the snow and into the enemy airfield and jumped in the Tomcat, possible, unlikely. The airplane starts right up, possible, unlikely, especially a Tomcat, you know, which I flew some, and you know, it didn't quite work like that all the time. So that was one of the things. The other thing is at the very beginning, Mach 10, he's getting to Mach 10. Remember, he's zooming out there. No, you're not going to eject at Mach 10 and not be anything more than a bug smash on a window. Unless you slowed the airplane down where we didn't see it, or unless he ejected in a capsule, you know, and the capsule managed it, and then he trucks into the restaurant and says, "Hey, you know, where am I? Earth, you know, planet Earth." I thought it was a great line. Those are the couple of things they didn't quite get right. But another thing that happened, you know, in the original filming was when they did take off in the Tomcat, what happened a lot when you flew in a two-seat airplane, especially in the guy in the back, if the guy in the back like was giving you some lip or disagreeing or arguing with you, and this was in the original cut of the film, the pilot in the front would say, "Hey, dude, look over there," you know, and the guy in the back would look over there, and then the pilot in front would just move the stick like that and bang the guy's head off the canopy to get him quite back into battery and say, "Okay, don't argue with me," you know. I'm in the front, I'm in charge, and you can give me an opinion, but I'll tell you what it is. So so that got cut, and I'm sorry it did. That was one of the good pieces that got cut. Another piece that got cut or changed was you remember when they were practicing and they were approaching what they call G-lock, G loss of consciousness. The first time they did that, they decided it was going to be Barbo, the the female that was going to pass out. And the Navy rolled in and said, no, you're going to prove to everybody on planet Earth that women can't hack it if you say that. And so they changed the pilot that passed out. It turned out to be Tarzan Davis, a different guy who passed out under G-lock, and then Maverick awakened him, and they recovered the airplane. And so little things like that were what we had to do with, the reality pieces of it. But I will tell you that the mission was a real mission. It was not to a place that had mountains and snow and trees. It was to a different place. And actually it was planned at night on night vision goggles. And so, and it's still in the plans. We still will and can do that. So next question.
Yes. How do they make it look like Tom Cruise is really flying that plane?
That's a good question. He is a pilot, by the way. Oh. And he is a master of his craft, no question. He was not the easiest guy to work with. He was way easier in '86 when he was a puppy, right after what did he have? Risky Business.
Risky Business, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that was a movie where he's sliding across the floor in his underwear, and he didn't know what he didn't know then. And Val Kilmer was a force to be reckoned with, and all of them in '86. But he came back later, and he had a bunch of Mission Impossible successes, and so he wanted to do some things the way he wanted to do them. But the original plot called for F-35s, which was, and if you remember when he briefed the admirals on what he would do, he said F-35s, but then he said, well, the low altitude will, clog this and that. And I will tell you that's not true. But the reason they changed from F-35s to Hornets, F-18Es and Fs, is because the F-18E and F has, the F has a two-seater, and there's no two-seater F-35s. Additionally, there's no one in Hollywood that can get within a mile of an F-35 based on security clearance, because, well, never mind why, but they won't get anywhere near one. Okay. And so, that's why that got tossed out. And the Hornet does that mission, and it is very good at it, and it's a low visibility airplane. And we call it, it's been out there for 20 plus years. And it's not the airplane I flew. I flew the original the F-18, which came out in the early 80s. And then it got bigger. And so the reason that they chose that is because they could put those guys without security clearance in the back, guys and gals, and they put them in the back, and they made it look like they were flying the airplane. And that's all due to the cinematographer. And he did an awesome job of making them look like they were grunting and squeezing, and pulling the airplane around and even taking it off. Now, Tom Cruise wanted to fly it. He wanted to go, through a training syllabus and, say he could do it. And we said, yeah, we don't think so. But not because you may not have been able to do it. It's not something we're going to do, the Navy, with actors. And for those people who get in that position where they're flying that kind of a mission, they have gone through considerable training with a considerable amount of flight hours. And it's not going to be given to somebody who's just, fleeting it up and trying to figure it out. And so all the stuff they did was real. And the very first showing was in Naval Air Station North Island on 4 May. And that was the Navy's call to say, we'll let you make this movie, but you're going to show it to the Navy people first. And they did it at the home of Naval Aviation at North Island in Coronado, California. And I was at that showing. There was 1,500 naval aviators in there, and we all agreed that was a pretty good movie, and there wasn't a lot of BS, that went along. And we're all sitting in our chairs, and we're all going like this and going like that, going back, and we're all grunting, And so we said, okay, that's about right. Have we all done that? Absolutely. Anybody's flown an F-18 or Tomcat or anything that's a strike fighter that shoots airplanes or drops bombs on the ground. We've all done exactly what all those guys did and gals, and often. So that's a long answer again to a short question. What's the next one?
Were those Super Hornets?
What about them?
Were they,
Was that what was it?
were Super Hornets the one in the movie? The
Yes.
plane in the movie?
Yeah, F-18Es and Fs, just like they selected. Would all those Top Gun graduates have come in and done that mission and been called in to do that mission planning and that mission? Yes, they would have, and they were. They were called in to do that mission planning for a different location in a little bit warmer spot, at night. And would anybody else be called to do it? Yes. Would it, a carrier strike group and an air wing on an aircraft carrier that's deployed, would they be given a packet that says do this? The answer is yes. And they would pull in the people that had the most qualifications, the most training to do that. And were those people always Top Gun guys and gals? They were in the mix, no question about it. The majority of them would have had that training. Were there other people? Yes, they would have pulled other people in to do that mission.
What's a realistic maximum G's you'd pull in an aircraft like that? 10 G's is obviously not realistic. Or extended range.
So that's a good question also. And the reality is that both the Legacy Hornet, the older one, smaller one that I flew, and the other Hornets, the new ones, the limit in the NATOPS manual is 7.5 Gs. And we always use that as a
Suggestion?
something to deviate from. But if you pulled more than 7.5 Gs, then the airplane had to get inspected, and it meant maintenance, and it meant that it was going to be down for a while. That's just because it was a wire in there that said you pulled more than that. In those airplanes, could you pull 9, 10 Gs? Absolutely. The F-16, for example, the Air Force F-16 has a 9 G limit. And part of the reason is because their seat sits back at an angle, and their driving stick is on the side as opposed to in the middle, and so they got a side stick that drives, and they got a throttle over here, and they're sitting back at an angle. So you can pull more Gs in that particular seating configuration. Have I pulled more than 7.5 Gs? I don't know, 500 times, or have I downed an airplane? Yeah, that many times, 9, 10 Gs. You do it if you need it. But the real question is, what you're thinking is, if you do that, then the maintainers are going to have to break the airplane down, and they're going to have to inspect it and check the rivets and all that stuff. And does the airplane take it? Absolutely. Could it get 9, 10 Gs? Easy. At those speeds, no problem.
Hold on, she really has been one.
Very common,
Say that again?
like when Phoenix went down because the bird strike.
Oh, when Phoenix in the movie, when Phoenix went down because of the bird strike, is that common?
Um, bird strikes are common. Losing both motors due to a bird strike, maybe not. As often, you're going to hit some hail or some other things that will cause a motor to be gone. But that's why you have two. You know, those people who fly single engine airplanes, like I flew originally A4s, A7s, and now they have F-35s which have one motor, which many of us have an opinion about. But you know, if you lose the one motor in the airplane that you have a one motor airplane, the rest of the airplane will take you just about to the crash site. But if you lose one motor in a two motor airplane, it'll take you back home to the ship because you have another motor. Is she going to lose both motors due to bird strike? Highly possible, maybe not likely. But we had bird strikes all the time. I've had many. Mostly they just make a mess. Most of the time, you know, due to the motors in the airplane, they're very aggressive. It's just going to chew it up and spit it out, and you're going to have to go down there and change some blades and things like that. But it's not going to quit. It's going to keep going.
Yes.
They talked about 6th generation fighters. Could you go through what those generations are?
Boy, let me think about that for a second. Well, maybe if I start from back to forward, I'm not as familiar with what they think about sixth generation fighters. I would suspect that would be like Battlestar Galactica and those kinds of things that are coming out, and they have the X-wing fighters, you know, and they're shooting the mud hens in the canyon or something. But the majority of from the leading edge to the back is how visible you are. The airplanes we have now, F-35 and F-18s, you know, on a radar scope, you can't see them. Especially F-35s. They call them low visibility. And it's because of, let me think what I can tell you. It's because of what they're made of and how they're painted and how they're designed. They are, regular radars can't see them. And I'm doing this because that's what a radar does. And, you know, till very late in the game. And so also the F-35s have some capabilities that are not as specifically directed at getting the airplanes to do what they need to do, but they instead are informing the rest of the battle group, the carrier, the destroyers, the cruiser, you know, even the people on the ground, what the battlefield and what the battle space looks like. They have sensors that tells you everything that's going on out there. And so they put them farther away than we used to fly from each other, and they just paint the entire screen, and they can take several weapons, air to ground, and they can put one weapon on one target, another weapon on another target, another weapon on another target, where we just used to roll in with a bunch of weapons and use hope as a strategy that we would hit the one target that we were aiming at. And we did. We knocked the crap out of it all the time, and we're good at it. But that we have evolved from that. And there's laser guided stuff like you saw in the movie, and there's weapons that are you put the coordinates in there, precise coordinates that are passed to you from various places that will go they will go right down the sink, you know. I mean, that's how close you can get these weapons now. And that's why, you know, four or five targets destroyed by one airplane each mission now. So that's 5th generation and sixth, I suspect. Fourth generation meant that you could shoot missiles beyond visual range. You could launch them and leave them, and not be in harm's way, but not so much the low observable kind of stuff. Third generation, you're out there fighting it up like dog fights, at third generation and before. And, you probably just back it up from having missiles to just having guns, to having jets, to having props. I suspect that's how they determine the generations. The dogfight, those old schoolers like me think that everybody still needs to know how to dogfight. And that is just like Tom Cruise, as Maverick said, you remember, if you think carefully, you remember he said, okay, guns only for one of the missions they went out on. And they all looked at him like, what? Guns only? How do we do that? You get in the phone booth and you beat the other guy or gal, and, you do that by knowing what your airplane can do, what his airplane can do, and by reading what he's doing and being out in front of him. And the Top Gun guys and gals are the very best at that, and that they get trained for that. The course I went through was 7 weeks. It was they called it the power projection course, but it wasn't really power projection because it really just put some bombers that we had to protect and fighters that you had to fight against. What they do now, it's I think 12 weeks course. They also focus on the air to ground piece, which is how you power project. You knock targets out, and so it takes longer because that's actually the former medium and light attack mission that's now been incorporated into the FNA, whatever they call it.
Yes.
How do you qualify or get chosen to go to Top Gun out of the other pilots?
You have to pay your skipper a lot of money, or you have to beat him at dice in the bar all the time. No, so that's another good question. And part of it, just like a lot of the stuff in the Navy, part of it has to do with timing. But so again, there's two different schools. There's the older school, and then there's the newer school. The older school was that you had to arrive in the squadron and be probably the best pilot or NFO in your squadron. And after about 2 years, your skipper would say, you're the guy and you're going, and you would go. And then you come back to the squadron as a training officer. And for the final portion of your tour, you would have brought what you learned there to train that squadron, and also to be with the other people in the other squadrons in the air wing who had been to Top Gun, and to train the air wing. So the original intent was to bring the air wings capabilities to a higher level through bringing people through the school back to the squadron that you were sent from, and then back to the air wing. Now, what happens now is that at the end of your first tour, you are selected to go to Top Gun. And that's based on your performance and your skipper's recommendation and the Bureau of Personnel thinking you have time to do it based on your seniority. And you will go through that long course, and then you will come back to one of three places. You'll come back to the air wing, in the air wing staff as a training officer, or you'll come back to Top Gun itself as an instructor, which is in Fallon, Nevada now, or you'll come back to one of the weapons schools, and the weapons schools are, and you're on shore duty now, are in all the various force concentration centers, Oceania, and Lemoore mostly, sometimes Japan. And then you'll stand up in a weapons squadron, weapons school, and then you'll go out to all the squadrons at that base, and you'll train them. Which is better? They both work very well. the course they have now is much more rigorous than when we went through, only because you have the whole air to ground mission attached to it. But in my case, for example, I went to an air to ground weapons training schools. It's called Strike Fighter Weapons Employment, which we did everything. I did that before I went to Top Gun. We did all of that before I went to Top Gun. So it was like we had two different schools that did the same thing, and now they just combined them. And so you were good at everything from surface to air missiles to fighter stuff to bombing to all that. And so the intent of the whole school system was to train somebody to bring the level of proficiency higher across the board. And so how they do it now, I think works. And they're very good, the guys that do it now. And I have to give full credit to Fallon, Nevada and Top Gun, who those guys that are flying the airplanes that you see in the movie, those are Top Gun guys, and with the actors in the back. And the actors got sick every single flight. And so I always told them when they went out there, just eat a banana, you know, because it tastes the same coming up as it does going down. So you're going to lose it. So just, you know, and to their credit, they were charging through it. And so the guys and gals that flew those airplanes were Top Gun people, and Lemoore, NAS Lemoore, California instructors from the RAG. They did a lot of the filming in Lemoore, and all that flying that they did in and out of the valleys. You know, we've all been there. We've all done that. We've all seen those places, and you know, it's they exactly the only time we brought in one different kind of guy for one particular piece of the flight. If you remember, when they were flying when Tom allegedly was flying really low across the desert, you know, when he was booted out, and then he came back in and he wanted to show him that the mission could be accomplished. And so he checked in and he said, we don't have a range time for you, you know, but well, I'm flying it anyway. And off he went, he's flying really low. That was a Blue Angel pilot flying that, because we do not fly that low. We don't need to, well, as far as you know, or as far as we'll ever admit, we don't ever fly that low because there's not a requirement to fly that low. 100 feet, yeah. 10 feet, why? You know, there's no reason to fly. And the Blue Angels fly that low because that's part of their show. So we brought in a Blue Angel solo pilot to fly that particular piece where the sand's going like this, you know, and up he went. But every other pilot that was flying that was fleet lieutenant at Fallon, in Top Gun, or at Lemoore in the training squadron that I talked about, the fleet replacement training squadron. So did I answer your question?
I think so. Hey, I have a follow-up. Do you know when they started allowing women into the program? This is Rasan, by the way. I'm off camera running the computer.
Aloha. Okay.
Aloha again.
Sure. Well, I wouldn't use the word allow, you know.
Except, I should say, except into the program.
Yeah, that's, I mean,
Surely it wasn't in the 60s when they started the program. Yeah.
No, we didn't, so, okay, I'll just, the first time, well, I was at the Naval Academy. My first 2 years, I was a 78 graduate from the Naval Academy. And my first 2 years, we did not have women, but when I was a junior, we did. So that's when women started coming into the Navy through the Naval Academy, and elsewhere. And then when did we let them, or I won't say let them, when did they decide to put them in the fleet with everybody else? My first squadron was a VC squadron. It was VC7 at Miramar. We flew A4s and we had females. We had one female in there. Her name was Mary Lou Jorgensen. She was wonderful lady. She was good at what she did. But at the time, politics and whatever else decided that we didn't necessarily need to put women in harm's way and into combat. And so they flew the ancillary squadron, ancillary missions. You know, they just weren't on the ship yet. Let me think if I can remember when Kara Holtgren was one of the first women who came in Tomcats, and it would have been about the late 80s.
Okay.
I was the executive officer of the Marine Squadron in El Toro, California, before it's closed, and that was a training squadron, BMFAT 101. We had women in our squadron. We were a training squadron, and we took women out to the ship for the very first time in the early 90s as a part of the detachments that brought airplanes on and off the ship. When did we decide to bring them into the fold as far as flying combat missions? Late 90s, I think.
Okay.
You know, plus or minus. And it was one at a time. I was an air wing commander in 98 and 2002, and I had about a dozen women in the squadrons flying in everything from an E2 to a helicopter to fighters, front and back seat. I don't think I had any pilots, now that I think of it. I think I had just naval flight officers in the back seats of Tomcats. And then they just showed up and started kicking some of the boys' asses, and you know, and they said, okay, well, why can't you do this? And so, you know, we never cared. We in the Navy never cared if your hair was over your ears or not. We just cared if you did your job. And when the women showed up and they started, you know, for whatever reason, they started proving that they could hold their own. It's including the ready room banter, just like you saw in the movie. You know, it's like in your face, and well, in your face, you know, then, you know, you are how you perform. You aren't one gender or one race or anything differently. You're just, you know, if you're a guy and you're a varsity quarterback, but you can't fly the airplane, well, you're not gonna make it, you know. If you're a girl and you're small and you look like you can't do it, but you're, you know, beating the guys in the landing grades and in the bombing range, well, we're gonna pick you to go with us, you know, over the beach. So that's the way I looked at it. I'm a little aged here, but I mean, I think they still look at it that way. One of our board members on the Tailhook Association, her name is Kristen Hansen, and she has VFA 25, the Fist of the Fleet, in AS Lemoore. That's a squadron that I commanded in the early 90s, and she has it now. She is probably one of the best fighter pilots I have ever known. She is awesome, and she takes no beef, and she drives a jet, and she leads men and women, and so we don't care, you know, what gender she is. You will see some interviews from her in the future when we get around to that, and just keep your ear out for Kristen Hansen. She's awesome. Her call sign's Dragon. Well earned.
Yes. What's your favorite story of flying a plane?
Mine?
Yeah. I've never flown a plane, so I think he's asking you.
Well, that's like a question that I get asked often, which is your favorite airplane? And I've flown a lot. And so your favorite airplane is the one you're in at the moment. Because if the airplane you're in doesn't think, it's like a girlfriend, you know, if it doesn't think that you have your total attention on it, it will misbehave. And it will do some stuff and it'll annoy you and it'll just break, you know, and it'll chip. It's like I said, it's like a girlfriend, you know, if the girlfriend thinks that you're not thinking about her, well, it's not going to work out for you. My favorite airplane story. I don't think I've ever been asked that. I think so. The most exciting times were in combat, of course, when you're getting shot at, and we would joke about it. We always made music and we had various motivating things that we did, but you know, we would like it when they shot at us, because then we could see where they were and then we could do our jobs. You know, we wouldn't like it when they didn't shoot at us, because then we had to find them. And that was harder. And so I probably can tell one story that was, let me think about this. So I would guess my favorite flight was a flight I made from Top Gun when I was at Miramar in 1986, and my wife was pregnant at the time, and she wasn't due for another couple of weeks, and I was due to be home in a few days. And she called me on a Sunday afternoon and said, well, we're going to have, you know, my water's broken and, you know, our child is coming. And so she said, go to your room and smoke a cigar and drink a glass of scotch. And, you know, when you get home, you'll have a child. And I said, okay, no, that's not going to work. And so it was Sunday afternoon. I drove my car down to the Top Gun hangar, climbed over the fence because the squadron was closed. And I had my helmet, my flight suit, and a boom mic. I didn't have my gear that you put on, my torso or my G suit or any of that. I just had a helmet with a boom mic that had a plug that would go into the radio. And I know this is being recorded, so I'm probably going to get hanged, but I think
you're retired, right? You're fine.
yeah, I think the statute of limitations, this is 1986. So I climbed up on I pulled the chocks out from under an F-18 that was ours, and I climbed up on the wing and I got in the airplane and started it up. And I'm not strapped in, you know, I don't have anything other than my mic and my helmet. And I taxied out and I called for a visual clearance, and I took off. And then when I took off, I was airborne, and I filed in flight airborne to go straight to Lemoore. And I landed there, and a friend of mine was coming back from a cross country training flight that he'd been on. He drove me to the hospital, and I got there 20 minutes before my child was born. So, and everybody was home the next day, and I walked into the skipper's office, and he looked up at me and he said, "What are you doing here? I thought you're supposed to be in Top Gun." I said, "Yeah, well," I was pulling my wings off my flight suit going, here, you know, here they are. And I said, "I came up here to do this." And he said, "Is everybody okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you better get back down there, because I think you have a flight, you know, in a couple hours." And so he said, "But this time put your gear on, you know." And so I went down there, flew back down there, and as I'm taxiing up at the Top Gun ramp, there's the XO of the squadron, the OPSO of the squadron, you know, and they're kind of waiting for me, two commanders, and I'm a lieutenant, you know, and they're waiting for me with their hands on their hips. And I get out of the airplane and said, where did you go? did you just steal a Navy airplane for a night? You know, and I went, no, it was training. I was training. And they said, they asked me about it. You know, the XO of the squadron, Top Gun, he was just furious because, you know, he was mad at his line watch who hadn't been there and all that. And the OPSO though said, well, are you supposed to fly today? I said, yeah. He goes, nah, maybe not. Go play golf. You know, and so I did. So that might have been my favorite flight, especially because I still got to fly after that and didn't get court-martialed and put in jail.
And you got to go play around the golf.
I didn't
your
play
question?
golf. I did take a nap.
What's your question?
How many missions did you fly and which one was by far your favorite?
How many missions did you fly and which one by far was your favorite? Aside from the birth of your child.
Well, that wasn't really a mission. That was a requirement. I have several hundred missions, combat missions, in lots of different theaters. I think my favorite one, you guys may remember it, some of you, was there was a mission in Iraq in Desert Storm where there was a bridge, and there was actually 3 bridges, and our mission was to drop what we called walleye weapons. Walleye was a Vidicom tube television camera kind of a bomb, and it had a really big bang for the buck. 4,000 pounds of ordnance and 10,000 foot frag pattern, which is as big as they come. They're bridge and dam busters, those airplanes or those weapons. And you would fly a profile and deliver them. And usually you'd have somebody behind you several miles who would guide the weapon. So you'd lock it on, and then you'd drop it, and then you get the hell out of there because you were getting into the threat ring, you know, where the surface to air missiles were and everything. So it was a teamwork kind of thing. And so there's only a certain amount of codes, I think 8, that the weapons had. So we only had 4 airplanes with backups. And so we all had different targets on the mission. And my target was a bridge in northern Iraq. And so I rolled in, and we were getting shot at. It was, you know, annoying, but didn't really distract us because we're invincible. If you're a fighter pilot, somebody else is going to get hit. And so I dropped the bomb. And first of all, the guy in the back who behind me was guiding it said, you know, I've got the picture, go ahead and drop it. So I dropped it and got out of the way. And he's guiding it. And then about 90 degrees through my turn, he said, no, I've lost it. And I went, well, that's not going to work. And so we had two to make one. So I rolled back in, and I continued into the envelope where all the weapons were, and it was sporty. But I dropped my other weapon, and I had about 8 miles from the bridge, and I drove it myself. And you know, when you drop weapons like that, you have a coverage of missiles coming in that are taking care of all the surface to air missiles that are shooting at you. Because if they shoot, then they're going to get hit. It's called Iron Hand and SEAD, surface to air kind of avoidance kind of stuff. But that window had gone away. So I'm in there by myself, and everybody's shooting at me. And so I guided that thing all the way in. But meanwhile, the first one that I dropped didn't lose track. It had maintained the lock. And so I'm dropping the second one, and the first one blew up this side of the bridge, just like that. And then right as I'm getting ready to release and get out of there on the second one, there's a truck that's just driving across this bridge. And I released that. And then, I got out of there and we had this all on film. And then that second bomb blew up the other side of the bridge and the truck drove right into it. And General Schwarzkopf put that on CNN and said, luckiest man in Iraq. Not so much because he drove right straight into that second, the first one missed him. So that's the lucky part. But the second one he drove right into, and that was the end of him and everything about that bridge. So that's probably the most exciting one I had.
Do we have other questions?
You ever had to eject?
No, I'm a firm believer in the number of takeoffs should equal the number of landings. And no, it may be funny, but all of us who have hours in jets and airplanes, we are prepared to eject, we are prepared to crash, or get out of there, but we all think we're all trained. Your training is that it will not happen to you. You are better than an emergency, and in an emergency, the first thing to do, you wind your clock, which means take a deep breath, see what you're going to do, see what's happening with the airplane, and, then keep it moving. And we lose motors, we have stuff go wrong, but you are drilled and trained in the simulator and in the airplane to get the airplane back on the deck, no matter what happens on the ship or on the ground. And have I landed with lots of things missing? Yep, you bet. Was I worried about it? I really was more worried about my landing grade, because that's what you get more grief about in the ready room than, that was a terrible landing. You get more grief about that than you do about the emergency you just saved the airplane with. So, no, I've never ejected, but we're all prepared to. You all go through training of what you get dropped out of, airplanes, and you have to parachute down. You go through ejection seat punch ups. You do all that, so you know what to expect. But most of us try to make the landings equal the takeoffs.
Good job. You still fly?
Do you still fly?
Yeah, business class on United with a Mary. Yeah. No, I fly in airplanes sometimes. I have friends that have small airplanes. Could I still, I don't have my pilot's license anymore. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money, but a lot of my friends do. And so it just depends on who you are and what you want to do with your life as to whether or not you want to continue flying. I would liken that question to, does Michael Jordan still go out to the asphalt court and play basketball? Maybe not, because he's proved everything he needed to prove in the NBA, and so I, still go out and shoot a few buckets. Yeah. But you don't need to go, fly a little this like that as when you've been doing what you just saw in the movie. So.
Well, Rodger, we just have 5 minutes left. Could you tell us just a little bit about the Tailhook Educational Foundation?
Sure. Well, there's two organizations. There's two Tailhook organizations. One's the association, and they are the membership association. And thanks for that question and that plug. That association is a 501c7 that does membership stuff, and we're kind of a family organization of everybody who ever had anything to do with naval aviation, whether you be on a ship carrier or whether you be an aviator or a maintainer or anything like that. The Educational Foundation provides scholarships for that naval aviation legacy crowd. And they are, whether you are a naval aviator of any type or on the aircraft carrier of any type, your children and grandchildren can apply for one of our scholarships. And so each year we give out about more than 100, this year 120. And we've actually increased our amount of grants from, we're up to about $470,000 now in grants. 120 kids, ranging from $3,000 scholarship to $15,000. And these kids, you know, our scholarship committee, which I get to read the applications also, you read these applications from these kids, and a lot of them from Nebraska, a handful at least. And
Woo woo.
One of them was mine, Roger.
yeah, so I'm, you know, we have, I don't know why, I thought Nebraska, you know, you guys had higher standards than being naval aviation. Yeah, so, but these kids are, they give you faith and confidence in our nation's future and our nation's leaders, and they're rock solid, and they aren't bothered by politics, and they aren't bothered by the noise and nonsense they see in the media, and they are just moving forward, and they have a plan, you know, and they are, you know, the high school kids, for example, we had 220 high school applications out of the 500 we got, no, 450, and I had to go down to 189 down the list before I got to somebody who didn't have a 4.0.
Wow.
And that doesn't include, you know, the extra stuff they've done. And so very impressive. And they're great people. And I'm so proud of them. And I'm so blessed to be able to do what we're doing with and for them. And the donors are the ones that make that happen. You know, we have planned gifts. We have everybody who's 70 and some change giving us their RMDs, you know, and we have, like I said, 120 scholarships that are funded this year out of 420 something applicants. So pretty good chance to get one if you have a 4.0.
Yeah. Well, Roger, thank you so much. We wanted to keep this right at an hour. You were far more, I mean, you had great information and you were charming to boot. So thank you so much. Please join me in welcoming.
Yeah. Okay. Well, don't tell my girlfriend I was charming. Okay.
Yeah. Aloha.
Thank you for your
Aloha.
service.
Thank you, Roger.
Bye.
Nice.
Oh,
Okay.
wait.
Did you ever land on the USS Midway?
Did you ever land on the USS Midway?
Oh, wait a minute.
I didn't land on Midway because by the time I was going through the training command or the fleet replacement in A7s, the Midway was already in Japan. But I did land on Coral Sea, which is the same kind of air carrier as Midway was. So Coral Sea was 43, Midway's 41. So similar aircraft carrier, but not that aircraft carrier.
I was a helmsman on the Midway.
He was a helmsman.
On the Midway, and so I was wondering if you might have landed when I was steering the ship.
He was a helmsman on the Midway, and so he was wondering if he was there when you were there.
Well, I didn't, like I said, when I got there, Midway was already moving over to Japan, but we love Midway. Midway's in San Diego now. It's a museum here like me. And it's a wonderful museum, and they also sponsor one of our scholarships, you know, for $70,000, which yields $3,500 a year forever. So the Midway Foundation is awesome. We are in great partnership with them, and the docents over there are mostly guys we know and guys you might know. And actually, here's something you might remember, helmsman. I went to 2 Fridays ago, memorial service for Captain, now he retired as Rear Admiral Riley Mixon. And he was a carrier CEO of Midway when they went through the transition of putting the bubble, you know, on it in Japan when it got its overhaul. So I'm not sure what your timing was there, but the Midway remains in our hearts. It's a warship, and it's a battle that we won, which determined the fate of World War II.
Thank you very much, Roger.
Sorry, we got a little glare here, but I'm getting ready to eat supper. So,
There you go.
all right, everybody, aloha. I hope this was